Welcome to SBS News in Easy English. I'm Greg Dyatt. Ukraine's President, Volodymyr Zelensky, is once again calling for a ban on aircraft being flown over his country. He is asking for what's called a no-fly zone after a Russian missile attack on a military base killed 35 people. The federal government is facing growing pressure to cut one of the taxes on the price of petrol. It's called the excise tax, and it is currently set at 44 cents for every litre of petrol sold. Members of the Nationals want the federal government to reduce that tax as a way of reducing the price of petrol. Petrol now costs between $2.20 and $3 per litre. The price of petrol has increased because of the war in Ukraine. The Defence Force says it is working closely with emergency services in the aftermath of the devastating floods, and it understands residents are hurting. Communities in New South Wales and Queensland are working through the clean-up process in response to the serious floods in both states. Major General David Tomei says a task force helping with flood recovery is made up of more than 7,000 people, and 9 helicopters are assisting out across 2 states.
In northern New South Wales, particularly in the Lismore government area, our heavy plant operators continue to clear the debris and restore access to services.
But some former emergency chiefs are criticising the federal government for ignoring warnings about the possibility of very serious natural disasters. The Queensland Health Minister says she has been diagnosed with COVID-19. Yvette Darth is reporting she has mild symptoms of the coronavirus and is isolating at home. Queensland has recorded almost 4,000 new cases and 2 deaths. Australians will be allowed back into New Zealand sooner than scheduled. New Zealand has had some of the toughest border restrictions in the world because of the pandemic. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has told TVNZ her government will make an announcement later this week.
So Australians just generally were due to come in July, visa waiver countries as well thereafter. We're looking to bring those forward because we believe we can safely do so. We'll be looking to make announcements on the timeframes for that this week.
Iran has claimed responsibility for a missile attack which struck close to the US consulate in northern Iraq, saying it was retaliation for an Israeli strike in Syria that killed 2 members of its Revolutionary Guard last week. No injuries were reported in the attack on the city of Erbil, which marked a significant escalation between the US and Iran. Federal Trade and Tourism Minister Dan Tehan says the cruising industry will be able to resume on April 17. Mr. Tehan told Sky News he expects a formal announcement to be made on Wednesday.
Now that we've got New South Wales, and I'm pretty sure we're going to have Queensland on board, my expectation is those protocols at the state level will be finalised in the next couple of days, and my hope is Wednesday we'll be officially announcing that it's 17 April.
The reigning King and Queen of Moomba this year are celebrating the return of crowds to the streets of Melbourne to enjoy the festivities. The monarchs for 2022 are Channel 9 newsreader Peter Hitchener and radio personality Fifi Box. I'm Greg Dyett, and this is SBS News in Easy English. Welcome to SBS News in Easy English. I'm Greg Dyett. The United Nations Secretary-General has called Vladimir Putin's decision to order Russian nuclear forces to be on high alert as a bone-chilling development. Antonio Guterres has announced the UN would provide another $40 million for humanitarian aid for Ukraine. Speaking in New York, he's warned the prospect of nuclear conflict is a possibility.
Raising the alert of Russian nuclear forces is a bone-chilling development. The prospect of nuclear conflict, once unthinkable, is now back within the realm of possibility.
The federal government has expressed confidence in legal proceedings against Russia over the downing of Malaysia Airlines flight MH17. The Australian and Dutch governments are trying to convince Russia to pay compensation over the 2014 incident which killed 298 passengers, including 38 Australians. They are asking the International Civil Aviation Organisation to suspend Russia's voting rights. The federal opposition says the government is not doing enough to bring down the cost of living. There is speculation the government might reduce a tax on the price of petrol. But Prime Minister Scott Morrison says any decision to cut the tax on fuel won't be announced until the federal budget on March 29th. Opposition Treasury spokesman Jim Chalmers says the government has done a poor job before the recent rise in the cost of petrol.
Well, there's a range of things that you can do to ease the cost of living pressures on Australian families. I've already identified getting power bills down, making childcare cheaper, getting real wages growing again.
In golf, Australian Cameron Smith has achieved the biggest victory of his career, winning the Players' Championship in Florida. Smith has beaten Indian Anirban Lahiri by one stroke to win the tournament. The 28-year-old Queenslander wins $5 million prize money and is now set to move into the top 5 in the global golf rankings. I'm Greg Dyett, and this is SBS News in Easy English. Welcome to SBS News in Easy English. I'm Greg Dyett. A man has been charged with murder over the deaths of 3 people in a fire in Sydney. The fire took place in Newtown in a building known as a boarding house that was the home of at least 11 men. 2 people are in hospital and 1 has very serious injuries. New South Wales Assistant Police Commissioner Peter Cotter has thanked those who helped with offers of accommodation and essential supplies.
So it is really, really impressive for the community to come forward, and that is with accommodation and also supplying of food packs for some of the people that really were unhoused, I suppose you'd say, from the fire.
The Prime Ministers of the Czech Republic, Poland and Slovenia have arrived in Kyiv by train to show support for Ukraine, the first foreign leaders to visit the capital since Russia invaded last month. More Russian airstrikes have hit Ukraine's capital, killing at least 4 people. US President Joe Biden will travel to Europe next week for face-to-face talks with European leaders about the Russian invasion. Vaccinated Australians will be allowed to enter New Zealand without needing to quarantine from April 12. And Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says travellers from other countries that don't need a visa to travel to New Zealand would be allowed to enter without quarantine from May 1st. A man has died in the New South Wales outback after driving his ute into floodwaters in Broken Hill. Authorities say a 56-year-old man drove into floodwaters on Tuesday night before being sucked into a concrete pipe. COVID-19 case numbers are up in Victoria, with 9,391 new infections, which is the highest daily count since early February. Another 8 people have died with the virus. There are 42,000 active cases. Verbal and physical attacks on Muslims are reported to be increasing in Australia. That's according to new research from Charles Sturt University and the Australian Muslim Advocacy Network. They analysed 247 verified online and face-to-face incidents, and they found most of them involved hate speech or discrimination. 85% of the reported incidents involved women wearing the hijab. Dania Rumea from the Australian National Imams Council told SBS News she's been the target of what is known as Islamophobia and believes the government needs to do more.
From the Australian government, I'd really like to see some legislation put in place to prevent Islamophobia and anti-Muslim sentiments from occurring.
The National Rugby League women's competition will expand to 10 teams by 2024 as part of changes to the Women's Rugby League in Australia. The competition will grow to 8 clubs next year and 10 the following season. And in cricket, Australia needs 8 wickets on the final day to win the second Test match against Pakistan in Karachi. Australia has set Pakistan a massive target of 506 to win the match. I'm Greg Dyett, and this is SBS News in Easy English.